Paul, thanks very much for joining us, mate.
Right.
Thanks very much.
No,
How are you
thank
today,
you.
first and foremost?
I'm grand, David. Thank you so
all right?
much. And thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, mate.
No problem at all. When I heard your story, I thought resilience screams from you. I'm dying to know more about you, but first, I always want to go back with the guests and learn a bit more about you. So if you can take us back to the start and how it all began, please, mate.
So, right for the start, my name's Paul McCaffery, for Falkirk. I'm the former nursing assistant with NHS Scotland, and I'm a testicular cancer survivor as well. My current role, I work for Cohona Scotland, who I work as the community engagement officer for. So that's me.
Big change from your current role.
A huge, massive change, and one that was an easy jump, to be fair. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't as if I was struggling to decide if I wanted to make that change. I credit Cohona Scotland for saving my life. So to be able to go for having been somebody who was able to use the charity's information to find a cancerous lump, to then being out there and be able to being employed by them and be able to talk and tell my story, speak to guys like yourself and be able to kind of really promote self-checks and things like that through my story.
Definitely. On learning a bit more about you, you're kind of had an not unusual, but a courageous last few years anyway. I would say, as far as not just your physical health, but your mental health as well, and that kind of stemmed from your previous role, I believe, as a mental health nurse with NHS. What made you go into mental health nursing? What age were you, and what's your experience with that?
So I was 17 when I first got my first job in the NHS, and it was in the old Belstyke Hospital.
Right.
I grew up literally a stone's throw away from the hospital, so both my parents were psychiatric nurses.
Right, okay.
So that's my brother and sister always think, you saw how they came home some nights. Why are you going into this? But at 17, I was completely lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my dad was like, listen, you need to get a job. There's this thing called the nurse bank. You can do it until you find something that you like. I'd done that for I think it was about 6 or 8 months, and I thought, do you know what? I kind of like being a nursing assistant in this environment. Right. You're young, you're meeting these people who, are going through a hellish time, be it long-term care, where it's like chronic schizophrenics, bipolar disorders, or, when you move to, the admissions and you're dealing with people who are having trauma and they're dealing with it there and then. Right, okay. So it suddenly just stuck, and, nearly 18, 19 years before.
That's how long you done that role for?
Aye.
So I take it during that time, obviously you were only 17. Were you meeting patients pretty much from the get-go? Were you exposed to people with mental health problems and the kind of ordeals that they go through from such a young age?
Really, you could even take that further back, because we stayed in across from the hospital in what was called the nurses' homes. I was meeting patients, because instead of going to the big play park, there was a big football park for us. So all the patients were there as well. In terms of a kind of professional role, right away, you're in there, and there's no way of getting around that. It's like, this is your role as a nursing assistant. You're going to be caring for these people. So instantly you're in, and you're at the place where I worked. It was long-term care. So it was, folk who had been in what was the old Belstyke Hospital, and it was called the Asylum, years ago, was, they'd been there their entire life. Their life.
Totally institutionalised to that degree. So I take it you had a mentor or someone that was working with you at that age when you were dealing with the mental health patients? So
because when you're going in, you're like you've got your staff nurses in charge, you've got the charge nurses there or thereabouts, but you've also got your other nursing assistants, and a lot of the kind of it's the people that I worked with had been in the career really since they were about 17, 18 as well, but these were people who are now in their 30s, and had 15 years of a career in it. So it was working with people with a lot of experience, which helps, and it really kind of changes you. At 17, when you go into that type of environment, you are completely unaware of how that's going to be and how it's going to affect you, even just witnessing, people's mental health being as poor as it was.
I think that obviously maybe you knew a little bit more about it because of your parents in that role as well, but all I'm imagining is leaving school one day and then the next day you're in what they called a mental health hospital, dealing with mental health patients from the kind of lowest degree from one extreme to the other, basically. I mean, it's a lot for a 17-year-old to take on. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy caring for people?
Yeah, I mean, instantly, I think I'm gregarious by nature. And at 17, I was no different. It's probably a little bit more boisterous, if you can believe that, at the time. But it wasn't a hard transition to be able to kind of go in. I liked, talking to people. That's essentially really what some of these people needed. They had family members who maybe didn't come and visit or didn't exist anymore, who had passed on or lived elsewhere and couldn't get. So you were a conduit to, normality for some of these people. And and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time working, and especially in the kind of the long-term wards.
Yeah. So I take it throughout that time when you're a mental health nurse, you then met your wife, had your kids. What age were you then?
So I was 26 when 27 when Pamela.
So
Pamela
you'd been in a fair time.
Yeah, aye. We had known each other,
right.
But we'd never directly met. Like, I'd heard, the name Pamela. She'd heard the name Paul, and it was one of these things where. But we just never crossed paths until the hospital merged, and we both had to work from the same area, and that was it. The rest, as it says, kind of history and stuff.
So as we touched on earlier, although you enjoyed your work, it did being exposed. Maybe it's at such a young age, or maybe even if you were older, it would have had the same effect. But being exposed to so many people's dark trauma, seeing so many instances of people really struggling with their mental health, seeing self-harm incidents, witnessing suicides, being there in the aftermath, and obviously supporting people who had experienced trauma in their previous life, or earlier years, that's then led to their mental health problems, that then started to have a detrimental effect on your health as well, your mental health.
Yeah, for sure. And I would deny anybody to say who's worked in, especially psychiatry, to say that it doesn't impact them. The one thing that does happen, though, is that you do just kind of put up this wall of, it's just my job, and it slowly creeps in this feeling of kind of, I don't know, just that, feeling a little bit lost, a little bit unsure of yourself, as time goes on. And like you see, all the things that you laid out, you witness, people unfortunately self-harming, completing suicide. It's going to have an impact. And we have this, there was this, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's like this environment where, you've done your best to just rally together, not laugh it off in a cruel way about anything, but just to have that camaraderie, to shake it off, and rather than really kind of deal with the impact of something that you've just witnessed. Really,
of course. I think it's the same way any emergency service or military or any occupation where you're having to witness horrific events. You build up a barrier, and the only way to kind of get through that barrier sometimes, is just humour. You need to laugh off incidents, because if not, if you bank it up and bank it up and bank it up, it's going to affect you at one point or another. And I think people out with that don't experience those find that really hard to understand. Mm-hmm. How can you laugh at that? How can you have a laugh at that? Well, it's a coping mechanism. Nobody finds it funny. It's just a total protective barrier there that you put up in front of to help you deal with the horrific events that you're witnessing, and the people that you're trying to help, how to deal with that as well. So tell us a bit more about kind of the effects that it had on you, and if you don't mind, like what it was that led to the deterioration in your mental health at that point.
I think more than anything, it was, when you become part of these events, and you do see people harming themselves to varying degrees, from it being slight wee cuts to witnessing somebody literally hold an iron to their arm until it melted to the bone. When you're seeing stuff like that, it's going to have that toll. As times changed and the nature of PC culture and all that kind of integrated into the NHS, you found that there was less of a care for the human being that you were, so the kind of deterioration became because you weren't getting the support for your managers that you maybe once were. You had a group of managers who were awesome, and then pressures and whatever, but really change the dynamic of that. So not feeling like you had the support really kind of starts that deterioration, whether you see it or not as well. It's like, especially within toxic environments, people always go on about toxic environments and say, oh, it's this environment, it's the environment. But eventually a toxic environment will turn you toxic.
Oh, of course.
And people forget that. And I'm victim to that as well. I probably became really quite difficult to work with because I was maybe going through my own struggles and rightly or wrongly, never talked about that or just, was a certain way that, maybe people, didn't understand the full effects of witnessing these for a decade plus. And
so do you feel like it almost sounds like you banked it up, you bottled it up, and then it got to a certain point and you just kind of had enough in that respect? Your mental health had hit a low, but along with your mental health struggles, you were then met with a physical health problem as well, which just came out of the blue from nowhere.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest thing that happened was having that physical health issue right probably at the point where I was at maybe my lowest ebb in terms of my work. It came right. No, there's not a right time to get cancer.
No, of course. But you were struggling mentally as well, so you had a fight on for your mental side, which was dropping all the time.
Yeah.
And then now, as you're getting lower, you're then trying to fight a physical problem. And I think that is where the topic of this podcast comes into its own as far as having you as a guest, because like I touched on before, I mean, people sometimes don't know what resilience means. It's bandied about a lot, but it's courage. It's the ability to fight back. It's the ability to not lie there and let something take over your life, and whether that be physical and mental health like yourself, whether it be abuse, whether it be injury or illness or anything, it's that ability to say, fuck you, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
We'll speak about the testicular cancer, because I think both points are important, and we'll come back to the mental health and obviously your mental health. When you developed testicular cancer, that wasn't the end of your mental health problems. It maybe even added to that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think we would be doing cancer patients and survivors a disservice by not using this opportunity to raise a bit of awareness about that as well. So tell me your symptoms. Tell me how you discovered that you had testicular cancer. What age were you, and what age was your family and things?
So I was, I must have just been, I think I must have only been 30 for like maybe 4 or 5 months.
Right, okay.
So me and my wife, the same age. Wee boy, he was 4 at the time. So the way that I discovered it, I had done a charity run for one of my pals whose friend had actually died of a heart condition at, I think, 42, I think it was. So died suddenly. We'd done a 10k run and to raise money for the British Heart Foundation. During that training, I was feeling a bit of pain in my groin. I was like, there's something not quite right here. I thought it was just because, fat kid running. You know what I mean? It's like, you're just going to get sore. So
it's like, just your belly hitting off your balls.
Exactly, swinging a miss, you know what I mean? But that pain persisted, and then I was my size deceives sometimes, so I'm quite agile for a fat kid, right? So I'm terrible, and my wife hates this, is when I take stairs 2 or 3 at a time when I'm running down. I never walk down the stairs. I fall upstairs constantly, but I never walk down them, much to my detriment sometimes.
Right.
So walking down the stairs in my way, and it felt like somebody was tugging on my testicles, like they were taking a paper towel. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh yeah, bandit, you, what's going on there? Started to get a wee bit of fear. I thought, right, let's just see what it could be. And I think, see, when there's any kind of physical problem that you don't fully understand what's going on, certainly for me, my head went straight to cancer. Yeah. Not thinking that I necessarily had it, but it was just that wee paranoia thing. Like, of course, yeah. I better, like, can I do this check? Didn't know how to do one properly. You know, as boys in Scotland, we don't get taught anything. Do you know what I mean? It's really not something. The girls get taken away, and amazingly so, get their talks on all the kind of female issues that they will have over the course of their kind of life. Boys don't. You get left with a condom and a banana, and that's it. Yeah, do you know what I mean? It made that banana really hard to eat, I have to admit. But you know what I mean? It's but certainly with that lack of education made me go on the internet and go, right, okay, symptoms. And for me, I'm quite kind of patriotic in a way, and always, if I'm looking for something, I do try and find something that's Scottish,
right, more local.
More local. So, testicular cancer, Scotland, and I found Cohona Scotland. They had a self-check guide online. I was in the bath, done my check, and I felt this exactly what they had said, right, okay. Pea-sized lump, and I was like, okay, better phone the doctors. Phone the doctors, got that appointment. About 2 weeks, coming up to, going to that appointment, I cancelled it.
Oh, really? So you phoned the doctors, your GP, with quite a kind of quite an obvious symptom of testicular cancer, and the initial appointment wasn't for 2 weeks after that, just for the initial appointment. Yeah. But then obviously, as a lot of people do, and especially men, they think, I don't want to go to the doctors about this problem. I'm not going to the doctors about this problem. It will go away by itself through time. Yeah. And obviously it didn't. No. And I'd kind of, within that time, I'd developed kind of flu-like symptoms, and the pain just got worse. Because all your glands are swollen. Right, okay. That's kind of what, and I was like, right, I stupidly cancelled that because of fear. It's like anything, it's that fear of exposing your body to the doctor. They've seen a million, they do not care. You know what I mean? You can be hung like Thor's hammer or like me, a wee mouse, do you know what I mean? But they're not going to give a shit. They really don't. So after that pain kind of started up again, I thought, bugger it, I'm just going to phone. Got an emergency appointment, went that day. Doctor seen me. He was like, Paul, I don't really know what this could be. It certainly feels odd and shouldn't be there. Yeah. You shouldn't have that lump in your testicles. So sent up to urology. The urologist even looked at it and was like, I don't think it's cancer, because it doesn't feel like it's because the way that some cancers work in testicular cancer, it grows on the actual, so imagine your testicle like an egg. It grows on the egg of it, right? Okay. And it's like a limpet. Unbeknownst to me, I had a thing called an embryotic carcinoma, which is imagine the chicken in the egg, so its wing popped out. Right, okay. And that's how I found mine, because luckily it herniated. So the type of cancer that I had, could have like spread without me even feeling a lump. I just would have had pain. So went and got it scanned, and it came back pretty conclusive it's cancer. Right, okay. Got my ball removed, and for everybody listening, I understand, that my name's Paul and I've only got one ball. It's not something that's ever lost on me. It's something that, when I do my talks, it's a good icebreaker. No, of course. I mean, it's quite admirable that you can tell your story with humour. And again, I'm sure that's another coping mechanism for you to add humour to your story. But it's serious, at that time you were struggling with your work, you were struggling with the effects your work was having on you mentally. You've got a young family, you're young yourself, and then now you've got cancer. Did you ever think, fuck, I've got cancer, I'm going to die? Yes, aye. Oddly enough, not until the point I was going in for my, it's called an orchidectomy, but I was getting my testicle removed. And I sat that night, and I had
not looked anything up. And the night before I went in for my operation, I looked up what they do as the surgery, and I had the biggest panic attack you could ever see. I was lying in the bed, like in fetal position, just going, like breathing heavy, and my wife's going, "Why did you look it up? Like you said you weren't gonna." So with all that, you know, it was horrible, and then you do think I could die. You know, it's cancer. You know. I think going back to, you know, the point that you kind of made in terms of resilience, though, it's my coping mechanism has always been humour. You know, if something gets a bit too serious or a bit kind of, I'll always try and inject some type of humour or something, even if it's just to make myself laugh. Do you know what I mean? It's the thing that happens. And throughout my cancer journey, you know, there was moments where, like, me and my wife laughed so much through, like, getting it and going through treatment, you know. And it's funny, the times that I kind of look back, there was really horrible things happening through that. I ended up with sepsis, I ended up with bird flu.
Right, okay, Jesus.
All going through chemo, you know. But the things I remember is the laughter. Right,
okay, so the surgery alone wasn't enough to give you the all clear from testicular cancer. You had to have surgery plus chemotherapy as well?
Yeah, aye. So I had to get 2 rounds of, I think, on BEP, which is just that, it's a heavy metal, like not heavy metal, but, you know, like platinum that's in it. There was this amazing Spanish oncologist who came up and went, "Paul, we're going to give you the big guns." I was like, brilliant, love it. So I got blasted with 2 rounds of that. At the time, I could have just got 1, but the process hadn't quite changed. So my oncologist at the Beatson had said to me, like, the protocol is 2 just now. That is going to change for, like, you know, in terms of your scans, to 1 dose of this, but I had to go through the full 2 because it hadn't been passed yet. Right, okay. So I went through 2 rounds of chemotherapy.
And just on that, I mean, dealing with memories of family members who have or had cancer and or friends that have cancer as well. I mean, some people say that the chemo's actually worse than the cancer symptoms itself, like it makes them more ill. Did you cope all right with that? Was it copable for you, or did chemo floor you like it does with a lot of people?
Oh, chemo floored me, and I've met guys through my job since. You know, there's this one guy I'm thinking of kind of right now who's done a lot for our charity. He got his orchidectomy and then got on a flight to Tenerife. Right, okay. You know, I mean, he had to get okayed by the surgeon, and then he was still running, you know, going through his chemo. It just wiped me out, you know, and whether that was down to the kind of other things that happened to me as well, like obviously having sepsis and, you know, being out. And I remember the point where I got bird flu. Folk were like, nah, you can't remember. But I hadn't been out. My dad was like, "Listen, let's get you out." We went down to Asda, walking through Asda, and this girl sneezes, and she's maybe closer than you and I, and I just feel it on my face, and I'm like, "Oh, Jesus!"
Only in Falkirk.
So then, and she doesn't even say sorry about that. Do you know what I mean? But then, you know, a week later, that was you. That was me back in hospital for 2 weeks.
Because I know people actually. They'll just stop their treatment. They'll say, "I can't handle chemo anymore. I'll just deal with what happens naturally." I mean, so many people find chemotherapy it's just so detrimental for their health, physically and mentally, that they'll take their chances in fighting cancer without it. How long was that kind of process from, like, when you discovered the lump in your testicle to then being given the all clear?
So it wasn't a huge long process, thankfully, because obviously I'd only needed the two rounds. It was kind of made longer by other sepsis and other things. So December, where I first started feeling pain, and then I think by April, the kind of following year, I was done. You know, so that kind of 5 month kind of period. You know, it was pretty quick as well. For the minute I got my my scan done and knew it was cancer, it was couple of weeks and I was in getting surgery.
Yeah, good. It ticked along. I think like testicular cancer and doing a wee bit of research and just knowing very basic about it, if you catch it early, it's one of the most survivable forms of cancer. And I think that highlights, when we're talking about raising awareness of the charity and symptoms, it just highlights if you find something, then go and get it checked out. Like, if it means you want to Google something to tell you how to check yourself properly or get a second opinion, then do that. But if you're not sure, then phone the doctors, because literally, I know you still went through a lot of hardship. 4 months later, you were cancer-free.
Yeah.
And now you have to tell the story.
And I think that's the thing. Like, again, it comes back to that resilience of self. You know, when you get that feeling, and rather than... And everybody that I've spoke to, you know, and we've done a few kind of video testimonials with guys who have all had testicular cancer. The theme is always, I phoned the doctor, didn't go to the first appointment. Yeah. You know, and it's trying to change that that thought of embarrassment and stigma, you know, and really, you know, again, find the resilience within yourself to go, no, I need to do this. It's uncomfortable. It's not going to be enjoyable, but you know, going to the doctors for anything isn't great. No, you know? I
think there's still a kind of attitude there with maybe guys in particular that they actually don't want to bother the doctor. They're like, it's fine. I'll just deal with it myself. It'll be nothing. It'll go away. And obviously sometimes whatever these wee cysts or whatever it may be can go away. They can be totally harmless. But I think there's so many bits when it comes to like prostate or bowel cancer symptoms, testicular cancer. Guys will just shut up shop. I actually had a family member in his 50s who, I think once you're over 50, the government sends you the stool samples every whatever it is, and he's like, I'm not doing that, in the bin. And he died at 53 with bowel cancer.
Right.
Do you know, just because, not just because he didn't do the samples, but had he done the samples, it would have been discovered long before what it did, because he was stage 4 when he got diagnosed.
Right.
And it was, I think he died within about 6 months of that, about 10 years ago. And I think we do still have that problem where males will just be like, I'm not going to the doctors. You know, I don't want to go through the examinations that we all know that's coming. But so after your recovery, obviously you had time off work, but how were you then in a place to go back to work? This was a place that you'd been in for about 10 years prior to your cancer diagnosis. You were struggling mentally with hardships, being a mental health nurse, and you described one incident where somebody burned their arm in front of you with an iron through to the bone. Obviously, there would have been other incidents as well. I mean, how did you feel going back to that same environment?
It was difficult because I remember the exact day that I knew there was something wrong mentally. And that was so, obviously my treatment had all finished. I was looking at going back to work in probably about the November. I was in discussions like man or something like that, things like that. It was my son's 5th birthday, and people were coming round, and you know, it's a big deal, you know, it's Dwayne's birthday. And I remember sitting upstairs, I hadn't even got to the bath. The bath water was stone cold, and I'm just staring at the drip that's happening through the tap. I'd probably been in that bath for about 45 minutes, you know, and then people were coming around the house, and I was like, why am I just staring into space, oblivious to myself? And kind of was like, well, actually, there's something wrong. Went downstairs and I had to grab my wife and was like, listen, I don't think I'm right.
You just can't do this.
And I just broke down. I was like, nah, I'm not right at all here. And I think I got an emergency appointment for the doctors, luckily, that day, because I think everybody was coming out dead early. So
who phoned the doctors then? Was that you? Had you learned from, if you've got a problem, phone the doctors in terms of your cancer, it worked and it was treated?
Pretty much.
And you're like, if I've got a problem in my head, I'm going to trust that doctor, I'm going to phone him and I'm going to fight it straight away. I'm not going to let it fester.
Aye, essentially that. I think because as well, I'm quite lucky that, you know, the GPs that I was going to, it was my family doctor, and that, like, the GP that I had, it was his uncle's practice before that, and he was there when I was a baby.
Right,
you know, he retired. My new GP took over the practice, so there was this kind of family link, you know, through. So I was comfortable in phoning up and trying to get that appointment with the GP. But yeah, straight away it was like, if there's something not right, I need to deal with this. And my wife, being a big part of that, you know, being a psychiatric, you know, staff nurse, you know, she was like, nah, Paul, let's just get you seen. And so went in, spoke to the doctor, and I got started in medication to try and kind of help with anxiety, lift that depression as such as well, you know, and taking that medication, you know, really kind of, it just numbs you more than anything.
Yeah, of course.
So going back to work, to an environment where I was already kind of struggling, made that even more difficult, you know. And then I had got moved wards when I went back to work after my cancer. And again, I went back into an environment where, like, there's kind of 3 stages of mental health services. So, you know, well, for inpatient care anyway, that I would say. So you got your kind of psychiatric locked wards where, you know, it's like for patients who are, you know, really were quite unwell, probably at the kind of most unwell, you know, where, you know, you had to lock the door. That was where I kind of moved from at the early in my career, but came away from that. Then you had the admission units, and then you had the long term. So I got moved back into that kind of locked ward, small, boxy environment.
Right, okay.
You know, no feeling very great myself. And then you're just coming up against it day by day. And then again, you know, you can't like everybody, and you can't be liked by everybody. And then you just come to loggerheads with, you know, different managers or things like that because of certain things that go on.
I mean, it must have been, I'm just trying to put myself in that kind of situation where I'm struggling mentally. I've then had a life-threatening physical massive challenge to overcome. I've overcome that. You're obviously elated, you're happy about that, you're on a high about that, but then crash, you need to go back to work, you need to be in that toxic environment, you need to witness suicides, you need to witness self-harm, you need to be the one who is there for people to voice their problems, and you're still duty bound to try and do your best to help them. It would bring you back down. You know, there's no way, because you were on a high 1 minute and then you're right back to square one as far as where you wanted to, where you were before. How did that feel? I mean, how did you cope with that? And was there any help for you there? Was it taken into consideration? Did your management and your work know? They would obviously know about the cancer treatment. Did they know that prior to that you were struggling mentally as well?
Yeah,
or did you just try and hide that from them?
No, I'd had discussions before, and, you know, talked about, you know, the fact that I was kind of just having a difficult time, you know, that, you know, coming into work and, you know, not feeling myself. I think that was the biggest thing, I think. Yeah. But again, unfortunately, within these institutions, it gets personalised. So it's like, oh, if he's having a rough time at work, it's my fault. And that's not necessarily the case. You're just saying, I'm having a really shit time. Can you help me? Yeah. You know? And then you try to kind of go to occupational health and deal with it, you know, through them. But everything takes time, and I'm terrible. I want everything done there and now, and I just want to feel better, you know. And I maybe could have done more in terms of my mental health, in terms of looking after it at that point. But I think I was just so checked out of wanting to kind of not be working there anymore. You know what I mean? There was, you know, feeling so low that you're kind of going, you know, you're driving home and you go, I could just smash into this wall. Do you know what I mean? Like, not necessarily like thoughts of suicide, but certainly, you know, that kind of, you know, I just want to feel something other than the way I'm feeling.
Than misery, basically.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, you've obviously said there, and I'm certainly not going to push the point about suicide, but did you ever feel that? Did you ever question your place in the world? Did you question, like, your right to be happy?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I think, like, the biggest problem being is, like, you know, when you're so caught up in those kind of thoughts, you do go. My biggest problem came when I was sitting there and I'm going, I questioned myself and going, well, everything became my fault. Like, and it was the stupidest things. Like, you know, my wife would say to me, oh, by the way, the fridge was open. I go, oh, and I'd kick myself.
Oh, really?
And she's only saying the fridge is open. Like, right, okay. She's not getting me out. She's not telling me off. She's just kind of making, like, by the way, you left the fridge open.
See, that's interesting, because I think a lot of other guys, males and me, but certainly in your position when you were struggling, if my wife or someone gave me a commented that the fridge was open, I'd be like, big deal.
Aye.
Do you know what I mean? But you went the kind of apologetic, submissive, or like, I'm sorry, like basically you gave yourself a hard time for it. And it was just so, obviously it was just the way that you were trying to deal with. Nothing was going well for you, even to the point where you were kicking yourself for leaving a fridge open or something so trivial like that.
The way that I always say it, I was apologetic for my existence. That's how I felt. I was apologising for existing.
That's actually pretty hard to hear, man. To be sorry that people need to face you, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm sorry that I'm in your life. I'm sorry for being here.
I'm sorry for breathing.
Is that, did they literally get that low?
It's like, oh God, I've done something else. And it's just that catastrophic thinking, And again, it's digging deep to find, right, okay, why is what you're saying to yourself and doing to yourself not true? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's looking for the reasons. My wife, my family, my friends could all say to me, like, Paul, Chippy, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. It's fine. Yeah. Like that's not what we're saying. And it's finding that within myself and being able to go, okay, this is what makes it a bit different. This is where you have to challenge your own perceptions. You hear, and again, falls in line with kind of the way that the kind of theme of the podcast, that resilience thing. You have people who, it's just like perception. That's my perception.
Yep.
Your perception isn't always right. Yeah, and especially, how I felt during my time where I was really struggling with my mental health. My perceptions weren't right. My perceptions were way off, and that's the biggest challenge that I had to kind of give myself, was that talking to go, not, you can't apologise for existing, given that you do, and then finding those inspirational moments. And the biggest thing as well that was happening through all that is that after going through testicular cancer, me and my wife were trying to have another child.
Right, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we had a wee boy, and we're trying again. And the complications with chemotherapy and fertility really made that difficult. So not only are you kind of kicking yourself for all that, but then, I can't get my wife pregnant.
Yeah. Of course, it's such a male kind of, like, guys will beat themselves up about it if their fertility isn't quite right, and even if that is due to cancer or the chemotherapy, if you can't father another child, then you'll kick yourself for it. Do you know? And I think that's such a male kind of a male way to react. I just keep on thinking, switching back to your comment about, like, you were apologising for your existence. That's like got me with that. Luckily, I've never. We all get down. We all get a bit depressed sometimes, or we all have bad days. But I've never been affected with mental health problems. But I know plenty of people has. I had an auntie that killed herself, and close members of my family have struggled. So I've seen it, although I haven't experienced it. But was there a turning point for you that basically you were at such a low point? You could have got lower. You could have went lower, but something in your head said, fuck it, I'm going to get better. Was that just because something, the penny dropped with you where you just thought, I'm going to fight this? Or was there a event or someone had helped you, someone had said something? Or was it just the kind of trying for another baby, thought, how can I have a kid when I'm feeling like this? I really need to get myself better.
I think having our daughter really kind of, when that all came a bit like full circle to the fact that, we're about to go to fertility treatment, it was going to be the IVF route.
Right.
And then so by the time that kind of came about, and then we fell pregnant. I didn't fall pregnant, but my wife did. At that point, you kind of feel a sense of relief, not just for me, but for my wife as well. I think the kind of thing that's overlooked, especially for men going through testicular cancer, is the impact that's going to have on, like, wives, girlfriends, partners, because, it doesn't matter how young you are, eventually somebody's going to go, what if you can't have kids? And they might not necessarily go, that's something I was thinking about, but because it's pushed so close up to you, it kind of forces you to think about it. So having to go through all that and, you know, feeling that sense of relief, not just for me, but for my wife and even my son, you know, as us as a family, being able to, you know, grow that family really helped. Within that time as well, I had been moved to intensive care. So that was just kind of during COVID. So the second round of COVID hadn't quite happened yet. So all my colleagues who were working, there was maybe a couple of COVID cases in ITU at that time. But then the second wave hit. And that was a completely... I apologise as well, but I was a mindfuck completely. Like, that was beyond, like, crazy how that was. But witnessing the people around me deal with it the way they dealt with it, and work it and moving from an environment where I had been in there for so long, I was probably, you know, too long in the tooth there, and maybe that's where a lot of my problems stemmed. You know, it was time to move on. So having this new challenge, I'd never worked in general nursing before. I'd never been anywhere near.
So that's when you left the mental health professionalism, professional side to it, and you went into general kind of intensive care nursing. Okay, still dealing with obviously traumatic events, but away from the constant mental health.
It was unbelievable. You know, some of the things you saw, I mean, I fainted 3 times in the honest to God.
I'm sure the established nurses and doctors was like, who's this guy?
Some of my colleagues, man, they
that's just Paul fainting.
There it goes again. Like, there's Paul. But they were amazing, and I got to do something I'd never really done before, where it was almost like task orientated, you know, not being a nursing assistant and it being task orientated. Like, the nurses, and with the way it worked in intensive care, the nurses looked after their patient. It was their patient and they looked after them. You know, they were at the bottom of the bed. All the things that, you know, I'd done as a nursing assistant, you know, elsewhere. It was the nurses that initiated that, and I never experienced that. And it was such a refreshing change of pace, and to be, you know, thanked for, you know, going to get something. I was like, oh, yeah, you're welcome, thank you. You know, again, it was that almost like subservient, like, I exist and it's okay. You know, and I think working in ITU gave me this massive confidence boost, like, that I really needed. It made me fall in love with my job again, just being a nursing assistant, but also gave me the confidence to move on and do other things. You know, I think, you know, unfortunately because of COVID, and I'm such a soppy guy, my heart broke for, you know, it's like people who say, COVID wasn't a thing or that didn't happen. I witnessed too many deaths for COVID not to have been real to me. You know, politicise it all you want in terms of kind of the vaccinations and whatever. At the end of the day, I seen stuff that really affected me where I had to just go, and I'm out. I'm tapped out. You guys who are continuing to work there are angels. I'm just, I can't. So I moved to the vaccination team, and then again, another confidence boost, working with amazing people. And then when Richie, who is the founder and CEO of Cojones, after like our interactions, I kind of was like, we kept in touch and became friendly and became friends. And he phoned me one day. He's like, "Oh yeah, we're getting funding to take on a member of staff," and I'm waiting. Going, he's going to ask me.
He's going to ask you, and he didn't.
And he never. I was like, God damn it, Richie. So like 2 weeks went by, and he told me about it again. I went, "Wait, when are you going to ask me if I want this job?" And he couldn't believe it. He thought, I didn't think you'd want to leave the NHS. I was like, "Mate, I'm ready for a new challenge. I'm willing and able, and if you are wanting me to to come and interview for this, I would be more than honoured." So that's how it came about that I started working for the charity, and the confidence that I had never really gotten because I spent far too many years in the one place. By going into a new environment, meeting new people, and you know, a lot of these people moved on and were going for nursing positions that were higher and things like that. So I was like, yeah, I could do that. And then even just the positive reinforcement, like, Paul, like, I think you could do this, or I think you could do that. Why don't you learn this? Because I think you'd be really good at that. It allowed me to regain a new self-worth.
Of course.
You know, that I was able to kind of go out and go, no, this is what I want, and I'm going to interview, and I'm going to interview well, and I'm going to do the community engagement officer job a complete justice. And I'm so lucky that, you know, cancer for a lot of people, you know, can really destroy their life, and for me, there was that conversation of going back into it, knowing that you really struggled with it. Is that something that's going to affect you? But actually what it's done is it's kind of made me let go of it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I get to talk about it and talk about my experience like it was happened to somebody else, you know, and then going forward, I get to just, you know, spread that awareness and it not be something that's dark anymore. It's been really cathartic. And again, it's finding that new reality that's changed. And yeah, there was a lot of darkness in that, but I'm going to use that and channel that to create a career for myself. And some of the skills that, you know, I've learned from Richie and, you know, being in Cojones, and it's a learning curve, and that's me been there a year now, and man, it's been a good working year. Like
I can remember, obviously the first time I met you was about a year ago, and I think that you had just applied, or you were just talking to Richie about it, and then I remember we swapped numbers, and I texted you a couple of weeks after, and you had got the job, and I remember how elated you were, and I was speaking to different people about it, and I thought, you know, like, in a way, finding that lump on your testicle was the best thing that could have happened to you, because it's now gave you a whole new career. It's taking you away from the darkness of working in mental health and the problems that brought. Touch wood, you're not going to develop testicular cancer again, but you can use your experience to help others. And I think when people are speaking about things, a variety of things, if they've lived whatever it is they're speaking about, people relate and they take notice and they listen so much more. Do you know what I mean? People, you can speak about your experiences and help people because you've been through it. Would you have changed it? Would you have changed finding that lump?
No, I can't say that I would. You know, you know, everything that happened, you know, and all the bad that happened leads to the good that happens. I think that's what we have to know, and we have to learn that, especially as a society. You know, things are going to get tough, and that's good. You know, it's a bit like, you know, I remember the first time I done jiu-jitsu, right? I was at the class and you're learning, you're doing all the bits and pieces, and then the guy goes like, who's staying for free rolling? And I'm like, I don't know what free rolling is. I'll stay.
Sounds fun.
You know, I'll stay. You know, I got strangled to death. You know, and it was that way where I was like, I was panicking. But you know what? Going through that adversity helped me learn quicker. It helped me not panic as much, and having, you know, I think that in life is the exact same things. It's like, you know, things are going to get tough. You're going to feel the squeeze. You're going to feel that choke. But you're going to come out at the end of it, you know. I
think when we were speaking previously as in an hour and a half ago, you had kind of asked, like, Davey, why this podcast? Is as far as I know, you're not the type to want to do a podcast, and I think when we're talking about resilience and the guests that are coming on, and certainly yourself included, I think there's a platform there for people to tell their story that haven't or don't seek recognition for their story, that they're not really given a chance to help others because they're not famous, they're not a celebrity, they don't have a big, massive social media following or whatever else. But that doesn't mean that you've not lived, or you've not experienced hardship, or you've not got a story to tell. I think what you're saying there about facing adversity, it brings in the other kind of side to the podcast, where we'll have guests on where we speak about the fact that resilience seems to be a dying trait in the ultra-modern, materialistic, kind of self-entitled world, where, in my opinion, and people I'm sure I'll disagree, a lot of people stand there with their hands out and say, right, what's the world got for me? Not what have I got for the world, sort of thing. And resilience or courage or bravery or whatever you want to call it, you don't realise you've got it until you're forced to use it. And that's what I really worry for the up and coming generations, because not everyone, people are doing amazing things all the time and overcoming so much. But to me, there is a lack of resilience, and it's down to parenting, education, government. Everybody wants to make it easier for everybody. And I think people are really going to struggle as they get older, whether that's through mental health problems, whether that's through facing tough relationships, tough financial decisions, tough career choices, anything that's tough. I really think people are going to struggle with that because they're not forced to deal with adversity often enough. They almost see that if you have adversity, then you've kind of failed. But it's totally not the case.
No.
Do you know what I mean? You need to fail. You need to fail many times to be able to push by it. So going back to your career now, tell us a bit about Cojones. This is your chance to raise awareness for what is an amazing charity. You credit it with saving your life.
Yeah. And
it's crazy to think that charity was started a couple of years ago by one guy who was working full time, and he had testicular cancer as well.
No, Richie's he's touch wood, Never had
definitely. Sorry, I've just jinxed him. Sorry, Richie.
Never had it. So the way that Richie started it, it was this thing. He went back into education again at 24. Was doing a marketing course, and they wanted to do a presentation, and he'll unfortunately can't correct me because he's not here. But I'm sure everybody was doing these medical things, and he was like going in and going like something about the Italian Mob or the Godfather, and he kind of went, I better change this. So stumbled across testicular cancer. He ended up working for the CVS, which is a kind of local authority that for charities,
right, okay,
that helps charities out. And again, it came up that there's not enough education in Scotland, and he was like, well, why don't you do something about it? So in 2009, Richie Richie started Cojones. And
so for 10, sorry to interrupt, so how was that? How long ago did you have testicular cancer?
2015.
So he had ran it for like 5-6 years himself, prior to you finding out about it.
Pretty much, like he was doing it voluntarily. He was working full time, and I tell the story that when I got better, I sent Cojones an email going, listen, thank you so much for putting your self-check guide out there, on behalf of kind of like me and my family. Thanks for saving my life. And I'm thinking it was just going into the ether of a big corporation.
Yeah, of course, and a secretary will pick it up and it'll probably get lost or whatever. But no,
there's Richie, sitting, reading that as a volunteer. He wasn't even employed yet, So now, the board had all these decisions to make in terms of the charity going forward, and they asked him to step down for the board so they could employ him as the CEO.
Right, okay.
So effectively, he can get fired for the charity that he started.
That would be harsh. That would be harsh. So
it's like Richie, just keep it cool, man, keep it cool. But and it's an amazing thing that he's done, and again, genuinely, like, it's Cojones, we really are trying to change that stigma and embarrassment, take it away. We're moving out of just awareness, we're going into, peer support, we're doing where we're trying to get funding so that we can, get guys who are going through it. Having met so many now through the job, to be able to just because we've got links to football clubs and different kind of sports clubs and things like that, and just to be able to get tickets to a football game and go, listen, come out for a cup of coffee and a game of football. If you want to talk about what you're going through, fine. If you didn't, and it's for any part of that. We're you got this boxes, which are this massive kit that it was Richie's idea, where you've got really. See, when you're going through your treatment, there's a lot of things that are happening where, like, it costs a bit of money to get specialised toothbrushes and things like that. So Richie's managed to get all this stuff either donated or donated at cost to create this amazing pack where we get to hand this to a patient, and we've just started putting them out to the beatson just now. Good. And hopefully by the time this airs, we'll be national and we'll be getting them out to every guy in Scotland. So
the charity's really grown over the last couple of years then. Obviously, you're going round, I mean, you say football clubs, it's not just amateur and junior team, you're going to the Premiership clubs, and you're quite heavily involved with Scottish Rugby as well. A few people for there. We'll start to bring the podcast and the chat to a conclusion now, but I think going back to kind of, you can basically help people with both physical and mental problems. And I think there's a lot of help out there for people, but the onus is always on the person who's suffering to go and seek the help. I think when it goes back to the mental health problems, and something that I've really benefited from in the last kind of 6 months to a year, is just people talking to me and asking how I am, as opposed to me seeking out help. And I don't mean me with mental health problems. I mean, if you see someone or you feel that someone's struggling a wee bit, it shouldn't be on them to seek help. It should be on the friends to just ask them for a coffee, make sure they're all right, just check in with people, as opposed to putting the onus on the person to phone a charity and explain their situation. I think that's important. I think that people just need to be a wee bit nicer to each other and just look out for each other a wee bit more. And obviously, had that happened to you back in the day, whether that be through more supportive management and colleagues or some of your friends and family, do you think that would have benefited you?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of kind of work, I think I'm fortunate that, you know, I've got a cracking group of friends, and, you know, I get to call you one of my friends as well. So it's good to be able to kind of have a group of guys that I can turn around and say, I'm feeling really rotten, you know, and you get no judgment. You know, I think that's, and I think we're lucky in that regard. Not everybody has that, you know, and I think it's just getting that message out there, you know, to men right across the world. It's all right to feel crap, and it's all right to talk to each other. I
think there is a change. I mean, again, when we were out for a coffee just before that, and it was something totally unrelated, but you told me that you joined a new gym and you were trying to set a 1 rep max on various exercises so you can work out a program. And you asked this stranger who was obviously an established kind of gym goer, would you mind spotting me? And he was like, "I no bother," and he helped you. And I think that in the not so distant past, I think guys wanted to be macho. They wanted to be that alpha male. That was the kind of goal for guys. Whereas now, like, you're seen as a bit of a dick if you're like that.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's more acceptable to just be approachable, be open and honest with folk, be nice to people, like greet strangers in the gym, help out new people in the gym. So hopefully that will just lead to people chatting more about everything. Not just mental health, just generally being nice to each other. So a word for people that are worried about symptoms they have for testicular cancer or any form of cancer. I mean, had you phoned the GP, cancelled your appointment, it worked out fine in the end, but had you kept on delaying it, it wouldn't have.
I mean, I think it's early detection saves your life, essentially, you know, and, you know, it's, you know, whether in terms of kind of testicular cancer, there's 4 really key things that you're looking out for, and it's kind of any kind of lumps, irregularities, firmness and enlargement. They're the 4 key symptoms. There are other symptoms that you can get lower back pain, or you can get like groinal pain that feels a bit kind of heavy. But, you know, if you keep that life message, that LIFE, lumps, irregularities, firmness and enlargement, you know, if you check your balls for life, you know, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of detect it. And just don't do what I done and cancel your appointment. Go to the doctors. You know, you know, it doesn't matter.
You're just delaying it because you're going to need to go to the doctors at some point, and whether that's soon enough where you can get help, or whether that's you've left it too long and you really need to go to the doctors because you're falling ill, basically. So as far as Cojones the charity and yourself, if anyone wants to ask any questions and get in touch with the charity, this is your chance to plug the social media for that, or the website, whatever Cojones use. I'm sure that people listen. It's a new podcast, but I'm hoping that that we'll get listeners, and they might. You never know who's listening. So if anyone wants to find out more about Cojones and testicular cancer, what's the best way to reach out? So we're available across all social media platforms. So in terms of the website, if you want to get our self-check guide, it's www.cojonescotland.org, and you can go on and find all the kind of prevalent information, signs and symptoms. You'll see some of our videos, but again, you know, Instagram, Cojones Scotland, Twitter, Cojones Scotland, you know, it's all there right across everything, Facebook as well. We've got a YouTube channel
where we have a self-check video. So it's just me holding a fake pair of balls because they wouldn't allow me to do it with real one, my own ones.
You can only say singular now.
Exactly, you know, aye. It's one of those ones. It's like everybody's got to check their balls for 2 minutes a month. That's all it does. I only have to do it for a minute.
Well, there you go.
So I'm used to doing things for a minute. It's but if you go into a YouTube channel and you'll see all the stuff that we've been doing and we're trying to do, going out to, there's interviews with football players, there's interviews with myself and other testicular cancer survivors. So yeah, go on, have a look. We're there. You reach out to us from the email addresses you'll find on the website. And yeah, that's us.
Perfect, Paul. In keeping with the podcast, I just want to ask you, resilience means different things to different people. What does it mean to you?
It's a bit twee and a bit kind of on the nose, but it's that Rocky quote, isn't it? It's about not how hard you hit, but about getting hit and keep going forward. Yeah, I think use your own personality to get through, the tough times. If you do like a bit of a laugh and a joke, just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't laugh and joke through it. Use that to help you, because otherwise you're just going to get dragged down into the quagmire with it. So yeah, I keep going forward and use everything around you, the people, your own personality, and just allow the positives to kind of really fill those gaps of the negatives. Yeah, because within any dark time, you're always going to find a positive. Yeah.
Paul, thank you very much, mate. You're truly an inspiration. You've helped me, you've inspired me, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of other people you'll inspire after listening to this, mate. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers, brother.